Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dragon's Greed Gaming. It is our very first time here on YouTube, our very first video. We're so excited to have you joining us as we finally dive into this aspect of the show. If you are new to the channel, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are an old fan, then welcome to our newest series, not Tales of the Old World. That's our Patreon, Tale of Four Gamers. So a little bit about our podcast here, or our show. We've started this all as a podcast about two and a half years ago. We've been doing actual play series for a variety of role-playing games, starting off with Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition with a very epic campaign called Gallows Geist. And now we're doing some Warhammer Wrath and Glory for Warhammer 40,000. And we've done a bunch of Alien, the role-playing game as well, with plenty more to come. We're going to do something different. We're going to dive into some old school Warhammer Fantasy Battles 6th edition. And, well, we just wanted to document our journey with you all and have you along for a fun ride. So, as you can see, I've got a couple co-hosts here, all of whom have been on the show before. So if you're an old listener, I know some of you have been asking, you wanted to see our faces. Well, hopefully you're not disappointed. I know I am. But I am your host, the Great Unclean One, and I will be weaving this tale as well. Sorry if I'm looking all over the screen here. This is really my first time on camera, unless you saw me on Garblag Games for our Alien International game. But, well, as you can see, I've got a couple people here. Off to my left, at least in the top left corner, Sean, if you want to say hello to everybody.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sean. You might remember me from such games as Aliens Again, Mork's Mad Boys, and the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Tales of the Old World.
Excellent.
Yeah,
you've been in every show, haven't you?
a lot,
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or every series at one point or another.
Seems, yeah.
Cool.
Gonna be playing Tomb Kings. So that was my first fantasy army. That's how they snagged me into the entire game system.
Okay.
With like one of those friendly mega battles, and then started taking my money.
Well, we'll get into further introductions later. I just want to do a quick round the table here. Below me, one of my, actually in this group at least, my oldest gaming friend, and by that I mean who I've known the longest, my very good friend Brian, who's been along this Warhammer journey with me for quite some time. What's going on, man? Oh, you're still muted.
Come on, Steve
those
Jobs.
Crazy Apple controls.
Yeah. All right, here I am. Hello. It's good to be back on the show. Yeah, it's been a long time. We've been at this very long. So 20 something years, 23 years at least, I think.
Ever since that fateful day in Games Workshop
Randhurst Mall, which is no more.
Yeah,
it's now Randhurst Lifestyle Center.
Is it still like a mallish though? Didn't they kind of like
it's like
a
kind of glorified strip mall now.
Yeah.
But they destroyed the actual place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it looked a lot nicer with the new stuff they were adding in with the new movie theater and all that. So haven't been up there in a while. Cool. Well, we're excited to have you back in the flesh. Yeah. So, and last but not least, in the bottom left corner, diagonal from me at least on my screen, is Eric, who's also been on the show for a bit now. So, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah. Been in Gallows Geists, Aliens, and Mork's Bad Boys.
Yeah, he's the boss in Mork's Bad Boys. So, good times. Good times. Excellent. Well, we're excited to have you all here. Thank you for joining me on this as we delve into some really cool old school stuff. And listeners, for those of you following along at home, if you want to join us in our hobby journeys, we'd love to see what you're working on as well. Even if it's not Warhammer Fantasy, any sort of miniatures or painting, any painting that's done is good painting in my eyes. So, but as I said, we're going to be doing something called Tale of Four Gamers. Now, some of you who might not be as long as the tooth as some of us here might not know what that is. I don't know if it's something they really do anymore with Games Workshop, but back in the day, back in old school White Dwarf magazine, we're talking like the 200s and 300 issues, like the 2000s of Games Workshop. Went back when I worked there. They used to do an article every now and then called Tale of Four Gamers. Although you can change that number, I guess, could be Tale of 20 Gamers if you really wanted. But the idea basically is that a group of guys, usually four, get together and they document their hobby journey as they start new projects, new armies. They talk about what they're painting, how they're painting, color schemes, the theme of the army, and and then eventually hopefully do games as well. I don't know if we're going to get to that point with things the way they are in the world and the fact that Eric lives on the other side of the country, but we're at least going to do the hobby aspect and get some models painted. And a big part of that is going to be in preparation for the old world, which, this being the 40th year of Warhammer Fantasy, there's a lot of rumblings that maybe it's finally going to drop this year. It has been like, I think, 3 to 5 years since they actually announced Old World, and they have continued to show some cool stuff. So my local game store, Titan Games, we were going to do a hobby thing back in 2020 to start up new armies for Warhammer in hopes that, well, hopefully in 3-4 years when Old World finally drops, we'll have fully painted armies and be ready to go. Unfortunately, COVID decided to fuck that plan up, so here we are now doing things a little differently. So how did we decide on fantasy other than it's the best miniatures game ever? Was really quite simple. We just voted, as any good democracy does. So we all came up with a list of a bunch of different games that we wanted to start working on, large scale games and skirmish style games. And then we voted until we narrowed it down to this. So we originally started with mostly Games Workshop games. We're all big Games Workshop players. We've all been in the hobby for years. As I said, I've worked for them a bit. Eric, did you work for Games Workshop for a time?
No, but not for lack of trying.
Okay, I was going to say, most of my friends either I met through Games Workshop or worked there briefly at some point, even if it was for like a year or so. But I worked there for almost 8.5 years. I'm sorry, 7.5 years. So I was really ingrained, and I've been ingrained before that and since then. But anyway, our original list was going to be between some edition of Warhammer Fantasy. I myself have been playing since 5th edition, and most of these guys have played through either 5th or 6th edition and onwards. We also talked about doing an edition of 40K. I've been playing that since 3rd edition. I know most of the guys here, that's when about we started 3rd or 4th edition. We also talked about doing Necromunda, especially since the new version has some really slick models and is really getting some love. We've talked about maybe jumping back into Mordheim, very cool skirmish game set in the Warhammer world. We also talked about Blood Bowl, one of my personal favorite games, which is basically the game that sort of kind of was my intro to the hobby. And we talked about Battlefleet Gothic, the Starship game in 40K. And we talked about Kill Team, maybe keeping things small for 40K. And we also talked about other systems as well. We mentioned Star Wars Legion and Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones board game by Cool Mini or Not. And we narrowed that down till we got to everyone basically voted which 3 they really wanted to do, one they weren't too excited about. And eventually the votes came down to Fantasy, Mordheim, Necromunda, and Song of Ice and Fire, with the others being kind of thrown to the wayside. And then, well, we just assigned some scores and voted, and this was kind of like a round of golf where negative numbers were better. And Fantasy won with a low score of 7 points, whereas the other 3 all tied with 11 points on our voting scale. So it was clear the masses had spoken, and here we are doing some 6th edition. So we talked about maybe doing 5th edition and going through each edition. But we don't know if we're going to do this again, or if we do, if we might change games. So we decided on 6th edition. Most of us, when we played 6th and 7th, was our heyday. I kind of consider that one big edition because 7th was just kind of an upgrade anyway to 6th. And 5th and 8th were very different systems. So, and I didn't play much of 8th. That's when I kind of switched over to 40K. So here we are. We're going to do this for 6 months. And each month we're going to record a new episode and document our progress and show you guys what we've worked on, how far we've gotten, and hopefully by the end of this have 1,000 points fully painted and ready to go. Maybe we'll do some gaming. I don't know. Maybe we'll do it through Tabletop Simulator or something if we have to. But at least the hobby journey will be here for you guys to enjoy. So we will document everything, and I hope you all enjoy what we have to show. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to each be playing, building, what we want to have in our armies, and just some brief introductions for those of you that might be new to the show. All right, well, we're back, listeners. Our first time doing this. There might be some technical issues. As you can see, Eric and Brian may or may not have swapped spots on our screens here, but that's okay. So moving on, we're going to do some introductions here and talk about what we're going to do. So who would like to go first? So it's not going to be me.
I will go, I guess.
All right. So Sean, welcome back. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about how we know each other and your appearances on the show, Dragon's Greed, and then a little bit about your history, with gaming, Games Workshop, any gaming of any sorts.
Sure.
Let the listeners know who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm me. I'm Sean. I met Chris like 4 or 5 years ago now when I was invited by a mutual friend to a D&D game. And so I met him and a couple other people I hadn't known before, and we just started playing D&D together. And through that, we found a mutual camaraderie, friendship, and we've continued to play games together, board games and things like that. We've gone to Gen Con a few times, and it's been good gaming friends. I've been in RPGs and tabletops since I was like 16, maybe a little bit earlier. Fantasy was actually my first game. I went into Games Workshop just curious what it was, and then they were playing some kind of mega battle, and I saw Tomb Kings and they had the cool Shabti model, so I was like, well, this is sick, it can't be that expensive. And then I was very wrong, as the next couple years I was spending most of my free money on this hobby. So I've been playing on a couple of Chris's shows recently. I think the first one was probably an Aliens one-shot or two-shot, where we went and got killed by aliens, so always fun. And then he invited me onto Gallows Geist, where I got to play Peter Verstolen. A great time.
Did an excellent job of that, by the way.
Thank you.
Voice and attitude was perfect for what I imagined him. So, yeah.
Good to hear.
I guess I can have another career as a casting director.
Yeah. And for what we're doing now, for the Tale of Four Gamers, I've chosen to play Tomb Kings again. I'll try to find any of the original models that I can, but I didn't realize they were so out of stock or out of production, so it'll be a little bit difficult to find some original ones, but I think I can do it.
Yeah, what was it? Age of Sigmar really put a damper on Tomb Kings, so yeah.
So what do you? The models are cool, but not Tomb Kings.
Yeah, maybe not for $200 for a single model, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you're gonna be doing some Tomb Kings. What do you plan on including? Have you written any lists? If so, what are you thinking of including or having? And if we're not going to use an original models, or at least Games Workshop models, then what are you planning to do?
Yeah, so I've been juggling a few lists. I wanted to do originally like a mounted horseman chariot list, but chariots are a little expensive, both money and point wise, for what they do. And so right now I'm kind of sitting on a mostly infantry list. I've got like a Tomb Prince, a Lich Priest, because you have to have both them, some skeleton horsemen, Tomb Guard, like a 15-man unit, some Ushabti, and then the Screaming Skull Catapult, just because that's a cool model and it has cool effects.
So no, we're not gonna do the. I know you had mentioned maybe doing a Casket of Souls. We're not doing that anymore.
Right, I wanted to, but I don't know if I can find like a good model to represent it. So I'll look and see if I can find something that looks similar and isn't too outlandish. I've been looking on Etsy, and there's some like Kingdom of the Sands models that actually look like Tomb Kings, but just more detailed and cooler armor. So
Yeah,
probably gonna end up picking up some of those.
cool.
For paint scheme, I always like the Cetra sort of like deep ruby red and teal. So I'm probably gonna go with that one.
Yeah, Tomb Kings didn't really get fleshed out when it came to color schemes back then, and which is, that lore was expanded on in the Nagash novels because it focuses on Nagash before he became undead and while he became undead. So it talked a lot about the different cities in Nekahara and like their armies, what was different about each of them and their leaders. And it was really interesting because that's, so long before the timeline of Warhammer that we're all used to. But that never really translated into the tabletop. I don't think it really did in 8th edition either. Not that I was too into 8th edition, but
No, I played a fair amount of 8th, and I don't remember them giving us too much. We did get like our second book, which was cool.
yeah, some
And
new
they added a
models.
bunch of cool models, so very cool. But they didn't expand too much on like the pre-Warhammer lore.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And how do you plan? Like, do you have a plan for how you're going to progress? Like one model a day, or build everything, then paint it all? Like, what's your plan to tackle all this?
My plan is to buy the unit, try to build it, and then paint it before I buy anything else. So just an hour a day, maybe adding in some paint on, maybe not even finishing a model, but just whatever I can finish with an hour a day if I can.
Well, I've done an hour a day painting back when I was really cranking stuff out like 2 years ago. And you'd be surprised how much you can get done if you sit down and paint for an hour a day, just an hour. Because then at the end of the week, you put in as much time as some people put in a single session. And especially if you're not doing like crazy masterclass level painting, you can churn some stuff out pretty quick. So, and as long as it's got paint on it, that's better than the alternative of no paint. So
The good old gray color scheme. See a lot of that.
yeah. Brian kind of changed me over the years, where at this point, like, I can't play a game with my own models if they're not painted. So like I refused at this point, and I've kind of, I'm a bit hoity-toity now, where when someone shows up with a gray army, I'm like, oh, look at the plebes with their unpainted army.
Couldn't afford the paint, I see, huh?
Yep.
Back in the day, I'd rather play with like the worst list ever if it was painted, than actually put like something, on the table that wasn't. I don't know. For me, that was just the biggest deal.
No, that's part of the fun and the lore, is having a cool looking army and battlefield and all that. So especially when you're hanging out at Games Workshop and all their armies are fully painted, so it leads you something to aspire to.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, cool. Well, and as you can all see, we've got the backgrounds of our armies that we're going to be playing here. So you guys have a little hint here. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
All right.
I am Eric. I've been playing Warhammer type games since, I don't know, for about 25, 26 years, since I was about 10 years old. I had some friends across the street that their older brothers used to play, and one day they had me like take over for a buddy that was leaving in their 40k game. They were just like orc models on the floor playing. I don't remember what army they were playing against.
Playing Floorhammer?
Yeah, Floorhammer in their basement, and I just been hooked ever since. One of my first Games Workshop not too long after that, and as a kid who was big into Jurassic Park, Lizardman was my pick.
Makes sense.
I still have a ton of my Lizardmen, maybe not the original models I started with, but some I tried to track down over the years when I started in 5th edition, so I've got some older models still in my army.
So you started in 5th edition?
Lizardmen, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's back when the Bretonnian Lizardman box came out. That was
Yes,
kind
which
of
was
my
very
first.
easy to get into.
Yeah, that was like half an
So,
army right there.
yeah, my
So,
first Lizardmen models were the blister pack. It had Oxyodal and Tahenowini was his
mhm,
name back then.
yep.
First metal models. But my dad made me buy the little paint starter set first to make sure to actually paint them with the Bretonnian peasant bowmen.
Yep, yep, I
So,
remember that. The mono pose archers.
Yep. Yeah, so
Well,
those are the
dude,
first models I painted.
we'll be seeing a bunch of those. Spoilers.
Yeah.
And then
It got
how did we first meet? Was it through Games Workshop
it had to
Gurney?
have been it had to have been through Games Workshop Gurney, because that was my store that I went to. So I think I started going there when Grant was still manager, worked through Eric and then Dave.
Okay, so we probably met then when Eric, or shortly after Eric became manager, because that's when the rest of us eventually moved over there. I knew Grant, he had
Yeah.
come to the Ranhurst store a few times, but
Yep.
by the time we switched over, he wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. So then we met and we've been playing together ever since. I played in I think your games as you first got me into RPGs. Because I think I played your D&D game. That was the first RPG I played.
There's a lot of people been through that D&D campaign. Let me tell
Yes.
you, the story of Strathmere is legendary in my groups. Ask Max; he fucking loves it.
But mostly played Games Workshop games, Fantasy 40K, and now into Horus Heresy. I picked up models for other games here and there. Privateer Press. I played a little bit of Infinity, but nothing could really pull me away from Warhammer. So
Cool.
I still have my old Lizardman army. I've been working for many years on my World Eaters, which started as a 40k army into now Horus Heresy. I think I at one point played almost every fantasy army and 40k army.
Yeah, I've definitely been there with the fantasy armies, that's for sure. I had quite a few back in the day, but we've downgraded the collection over
Yeah,
the years.
couple key.
I don't need to know if I need 6 armies that are all sitting in army cases unpainted. So, all right.
For this
yeah, what are you gonna
campaign,
play? Yeah, tell us about this. What are you gonna play? What's the plan?
so for this Tale of Gamers, I went with Vampire Counts because my Lizardmen did not need any new models yet. We'll see this summer. I really liked the Vampire Counts, the Strigoi bloodline. I remember the Usharan Vampire Lord that I think he was the original Strigoi. His storyline, they had a little blurb in the old Vampire Counts army book that I really liked, and how they just became these like bestial monsters that kind of like hid from the world.
Yeah, that all gets expanded on in those Nagash novels as well, which was
Does
cool. Yeah, because you meet all those characters when they're still living, and once the curse of vampirism starts to run through Nekahara, so you meet, Neferetta and Khalida. Was it Abarash, the blood dragon guy?
The blood dragon.
And was it Warsaron, the Necrarch?
Oh, Warsaron. Yes, he's the Strigoi, I think.
I think he's the Necrarch. Yeah, I don't remember the Strigoi's name.
Okay, I think it was Usharan.
Or it might be Ursharon. But yeah, so there's I recommend. I mean, all those Times of Legend books were awesome, but the Nagash one just has so much good back flavor to fill in some gaps. So, okay, so we're doing Strigoi. What kind of models are we going to be using?
So I'm actually going to try and use the list. They have a themed list in the back of the 6th edition book where you can actually theme it towards Strigoi. So I have a Vampire Lord or Vampire Thrall for 1,000 points, I'm either going to use the one from the Crimson Court box set, the one with the big wings, or I'm going to use the new Boxing Day exclusive model, the Ghoul King on a Throne. And then I have 20 of the current ghouls, plastic ghouls, or 25 of them, I think. 20 of the old metal ghouls. I'm gonna try and get some Felbats in there, and if I can track down some good-looking militia or something, I want to include the Strigony, the human followers that like help the Strigoi vampires.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because that special list had the Strigani, I think it was, and
Yep.
then isn't there a special unit of ghouls you can take?
Yeah, so I'm going to use the metal ones to represent the Charnel Guard, the like kind of stronger ones.
Okay. And you know those old metal blisters from 6th edition, like they'll basically look like old men in loincloths, right? Those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like carrying like rocks and shit.
Rocks and little like sticks and stuff. Yep. So those are gonna be my Charnel Guard.
What was harder to rank up, the metal ones or the plastic ones?
That's hard. So the metal ones all are kind of like looking in a different direction. So, but they're ghouls, so you know they don't know what they're doing. Just follow the group.
I remember the plastic ones. If you didn't build them lined up because they're hunched over, if you've got them too far forward on the base, they're bumping into the guy in front of them. If they're too far back, then they're bumping into the guy behind them. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to number the bottom.
Yeah, that's what I did. I had a Vampire Count's army as well. I was doing a Lamian army, which I was trying to theme using Tomb King models because Lamia's in Khemri. And I had a unit of those plastic ghouls, and I remember I built them, and then I tried to rank them up, and that was a mistake.
Yeah.
So yeah, they got numbered.
And I have a unit of skeletons because you need skeletons for vampire army.
That's true. Yeah. Cool. Well, it sounds like you definitely got 1,000 points easily covered. So, any thoughts on color scheme?
The ghouls I kind of tested out, kind of like a more green tinted skin with like a blue hair on the current kit. Not really. I like the dark reds for the skeleton accessories, but I might end up going blue to pull them back into the ghouls, like kind of like hair and stuff. I don't know. I got a few ideas. My vampires I usually paint it with like a blue skin tone too, so I might just tie everything into that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I'm interested to see. I love those 6th edition specialty lists. I wish they would have kept them around because that although some of those were still possible when in later editions because they opened up how army building works. So
a little bit, yeah.
Very exciting.
Not quite the same.
Yeah. No vampire lords though, not in 1,000 points. That'd be half the army right there. So okay. All right. Well, we'll switch it over then to our very good friend Brian. Welcome back, buddy. How have you been?
I've been good. Yeah, can't complain. Busy. I don't know if any listeners remember, I was Firth back in the I don't know, what was it? Warhammer.
Gallows Guys. Yeah.
Gallows Guys. Yeah. Man, that was what, like 2 years or like a year and change I was on for, I think. Way longer than I've ever played any RPG. Like I was like, I can't believe this is still happening. Like I always, my experience with RPGs is always like you meet twice and then like 6 months later you meet once and you're like, okay, we'll see it, see you next week, and then like it just goes away.
Yep.
And here it was like every weekend for a year, and at least a year and a half anyway. But
yeah,
that was awesome. I enjoyed getting to do the first thing. Like I said, I'm not particularly experienced with the RPG. I come from more of the hobby background. So that was a cool experience for me.
Yeah, well, we've had there was at least one listener who said that Firth's final scene was a tearjerker.
Oh, that's good.
That was incredible to hear. So yeah, this is the man behind The Apprentice. Cool. So yeah, tell the listeners a bit how we met and your history with tabletop and Games Workshop.
Yeah. So we met probably almost 25 years ago at the Games Workshop playing games. Back then, what was it? I was Vampire Counts, I think. I think Vampire Counts was my first army.
I thought your first army was the Imperial Guard that you did.
Oh yeah,
the blue ones,
yes.
Blue army,
actually,
blue highlights.
Let me back up. It was actually my first army was a Demon Hunters army that had the Imperial Guard as its like auxiliary, which then became an Imperial Guard army. And then I pivoted to was it Storm of Chaos back then?
Yeah,
Something like that.
it's right around that
Where
time.
they did that global campaign and all
Yep.
that. And that's when I started the vampire, or the vampire class was mostly just a skeleton army, and then also a Slanesh Chaos Warriors army.
Yeah, I
that was
remember
really
your
cool.
warriors. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I've haven't won too many games in my history, but they've always looked great while they were dying. I like to
It's
think, you
true.
know,
It's
like
true.
that to me, the hobby is still kind of the kind of the big part of it, the big part of the whole thing for me. And so it was a lot of horde armies, like Imperial Guard, skeletons. I don't know why I kept getting pulled in that direction, where I was like, oh, there's like an 80-man list here, or 80 model list, and for like 750 points or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I'd promised myself I'd never do again, which is why I'm doing Bretonnia for
And
this.
here we are.
And I think I kind of landed on Bretonnia because there was everybody was doing something that was a little bit darker, a little bit more sinister. I'm like, well, there's got to be some good guys to die in front of in front of all these
Terrible
chaos.
things.
Yeah. No, but actually, I mean, Bretonnia has always kind of been my I've always loved Bretonnia, and I've loved like the old Bretonnia stuff. It's a little hokey almost sometimes. Like you were mentioning the one piece plastic bowmen.
Yep.
I actually prefer those one piece plastic bowmen to the newer ones.
Yeah. Many people love the monopost stuff. That's why 5th and 6th still have such huge followings.
Yeah.
Older than that too.
So that's obviously going to be the kind of backbone of what I'm doing with Bretonnia. I had all these ideas, like, for me, like the hobby end of it, as soon as you're like, yeah, let's do this thing, I was like, okay, brilliant, and I'm like, I could go this direction, or I could go that direction, I could go that direction, or like, and that's why, especially when we were doing like the list decision or the army decisions, I was like, you guys decide, and I know I'm going to have ideas with whatever is left over, but with the Bretonnia, I'm pretty fired up about it. I've kind of kept it, I think, relatively manageable with just like 50 peasant bowmen,
Okay.
which doesn't feel like totally obnoxious to me.
Well, for our listeners who may not know, as Brian said, he's always been a big painter and builder, and in the heyday, this man could churn out armies like no one else. And I still am floored to this day by the quality of those Imperial Guard being like, I remember when you brought him in to like, oh yeah, I've been working on this. This dude's got like 2 trays in his figure case full of painted basic guardsmen, which back then was like, holy shit, like you actually painted them and they looked awesome. And it's just gone on and on since then. So I don't fear that you'll have any problem getting it done. What else are you gonna have other than 50 filthy bowmen?
Revolting peasants. There's gonna be 50 peasant bowmen. Then it's got to have the and I never know how to say this word. Is it the trebuchet or trebuchet or something like that?
Trebuchet,
the big catapult thingy.
Yep.
I just really dig that model, and I've already kind of tracked one down on Etsy that's 3D printed that looks basically like the GW one.
Yeah.
The actual GW one is like an absurd.
Oh, probably. Money. I would imagine at least $100 to $200 easy.
Yeah, and I remember it's metal and it's kind of a pain to build as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't know if that ever went resin or not in the switch to fine cast, which if it did, avoid that like the plague. Stick with the metal one for sure.
Yeah. So I found a 3D printed one on Etsy that's basically the same. So I'm going to roll with that probably. And I feel like that's only 100 points actually.
Yes,
so
good.
So
and then I assume you've got your Paladin General and your BSB.
Well, yeah. I mean, the rest of the list kind of writes itself, because then you have to have, so you got a general, then you have to have a standard bearer, standard bearer.
Yep.
So those are two there, and then you have to have a Knights of the Realm.
Oh, that's right. You gotta have the knight unit too.
So there's 5 knights. There's the paladin, battled standard bearer, and then the general, who I put on a Pegasus to kind of soak up some points. Really, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, it's like 50 points right there.
Yeah.
And then a damsel. So
Yeah, your damsel model, I dig. That's cool. You know, she looks a little over the top, but not too much, where she kind of fits in too.
yeah, it's pretty hokey. So I actually had an absolute blast trying to find that model, because it totally reminded me of being like younger, when like, you know, you go into like Games Plus or whatever, and it was just a wall of blister packs, you
Yep.
know, and you'd go through and you'd like shake the metal one to get the model to turn around so you could see what it was, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So it was basically, they've got that Reaper wall, and it's all,
Yep.
they've got their super weird plastic ones, and then they're kind of slightly better plastic ones, and their metal ones. And I literally spent probably an hour and a half walking up and down this wall, looking at all the models, like shaking the blisters, trying to get the, you know, the model to face me so I could see if I actually wanted it or not. And that alone was just like totally worth it for me. Just doing that for, you know, taking time out of the day to do something like that was really, really, really cool.
Paint an army up just for this model.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so this is my big thing now, for me anyway. When it comes to this, I usually like make bargains with myself for like, okay, if you knock out 25 bowmen, then you can paint the damsel, or like, you know, if you knock out the other 20 bowmen, then you can paint the guy on the Pegasus, the paladin on the Pegasus. So I have to like make bargains with myself about how I'm going to get to some of these things.
A lot of like, painters do that. It's a good way to reward yourself after going through the slog of basic infantry, which for some armies can really be a slog. So, you know, if they got a lot of detail, or if you're doing monopose, some people are like, oh my god, this is so boring. So, cool.
But I mean, the monopose stuff helps me paint, because I know like where every fold is by the time you get to the like the, you know, the 20th one. You're like, all right, there's that fold, there's that fold. You know, you just kind of hammer it out.
Yep.
But yeah, going back to this damsel, she is like a little bit over the top. I really kind of wrestled with whether or not to get her. There was one that looked a little bit more like a sorceress, you know, but this one just felt like it had that. It really kind of nails the era. She's got like that coned hat. I don't even know what you call those things.
Yeah.
The ribbons coming off of it and stuff
Well,
like that.
you know what I like too is like, she's not thin as a rail. She's got some curves, which you know, usually like the old Bretonnian damsel that's got the staff in the air.
Yeah.
You know, she's a pretty thin model.
Yeah.
You know, how does she compare like scale wise? Does she look
spot on with those the only thing that makes her look maybe a little bigger is that she actually she comes on her own kind of plastic little base that's maybe in a quarter inch or something like that. I don't know. Cool. Not even.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to finally seeing the peasant army in all of its glory, and maybe one day have to marching against 50 flaming arrows down the field.
Yeah.
We'll see. Well, the question will be answered. Can 50 peasant bowmen kill 5 chaos knights before they get torn to shreds in combat? So, although knowing Warhammer and our dice rolls, the peasants will probably slap the knights in combat. So,
I have to say too that one of the funny things. So first off, like going back and building this list, like picking up that old book, I remember how wild it was to build an army back then, where it was like there'd be a reference to something on page like 78, and that was actually a rule that was written on page 50, but in that rule it referenced something that was like on page 30. And I was like flipping back and through this book, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally remember this experience of like having to like every rule has like a reference to something else that's something, you know, that the information's somewhere else. And I felt like some kind of scholar pouring through these like, you know, pages.
Man. I miss those days of going through those books. I used to know Warhammer like the back of my hand, dude. In and out. I could answer any question, man. I remember teaching academy back in the day. Yeah,
it really forces you to like know the book, basically. Yeah, got to read every page.
I could do that for most of the armies too back then. Even the ones I didn't like dwarves, filthy dwarves, and those fucking lizards. Cool. Well, I'm the last one here. I am the Great Unclean One, your host, and I have been playing Warhammer and tabletop games for many, many moons now. I started way back in like 5th grade-ish, My first real exposure was the board games of Hero Quest and Battle Masters, which I know a lot of my longbeards out there are very familiar with, and that eventually led to learning about Games Workshop, and I used the models from Battle Masters to help build my first Empire army, and I've been an Empire fanboy ever since. But back then, I couldn't really afford to do a Warhammer army. There were no Games Workshops around where I lived at the time, so I'd have to get them through like our local game stores back in the day, which were kind of few and far in between back in like the early 90s. So a lot of it was mail order, which, although the prices were great, half the time I didn't really know what you were buying because there were no pictures and no real internet back then either. So started with that. Me and Tyler from our show and a couple of our other friends settled on playing Blood Bowl, which was far cheaper. $50 for the game and then $30 for a team, and you're off to the races. So had a whole bunch of teams for Blood Bowl, and then eventually Games Workshop opened at Ranhurst Mall years later, and that was the mall that I used to go to on the weekends with my buddies. So got really into Warhammer from there, started adding on to the Empire Army, and just went further and further. I've been a gamer of all sorts since forever: board games, video games, miniature games, RPGs. Started D&D in high school and have been playing role-playing games ever since. Although I'm not really a fan of D&D anymore. It's kind of, after like 20 years of playing, I'm kind of over it. And now we're doing other systems, as you guys have seen on the show. And yeah, here we are. And as you can see with my profile picture back here, I'm going to be doing Hordes of Chaos, or Mortals of Chaos, if you will. I am a huge fan of Nurgle, as everybody knows. I have a massive, about 5,000 point death card army for 40k, but we are going to be, we got a visitor. We've got I'm going to do some undivided chaos this time. I've got the old Lord of Chaos, the Corn Lord on the Juggernaut, one of my absolute favorite models, which I actually owned back in the day. I did have a Chaos army back then, and I just think that model's so sick. So he's going to be the leader, although he's going to be a hero, not a lord, obviously. So he takes up a good like 250 points of the list just because he's on the Juggernaut and has like one minor magic item. Luckily, it'll be a small army because it's Chaos. I've got 12 Chaos Warriors with great weapons. I managed to get my hands on the old upgrade kit for the great weapons, which were a pain in the ass to line up, but they are ready to go and smash. They're already built and constructed. And then I'm going to have 5 Chaos Knights. I don't even think they're chosen. If they are, that's like the other half of the army. That's like 300 points right there. And I've always loved Dragon Ogres. Even the old metal models, I know they look kind of goofy to some people these days, but I always thought Dragon Ogres were so fucking cool for whatever reason. And I can take them as a rare choice because of how Beastmen armies work in this edition. So you got mortals, demons, and beasts, and all the mortal stuff is core. But Dragon Ogres are like 70 points a pop. So that 300 point, or that 3-man unit, is like 270 points. So it's not a very big army. It's 5 knights, 12 warriors, the dude on the Juggernaut, 3 Dragon Ogres, and then I think there were points left over for a squad of 5 hounds, or maybe 10 hounds. I might switch out to have a chariot in there as well, depending, because I think the new chariot model, the plastic one, I have PTSD from trying to build the old metal one from back in the day. So seeing the plastic one now, I've always thought that would be cool to have in an army too. So I just like the look of the big armored Chaos Warriors, and it'll be a small project that I think can easily be done in 6 months. So I pretty much own, well, I've got the getting started collecting box for Age of Sigmar, which has the new Chaos Warriors. Well, the newest ones just came out, and it's got the new Chaos Knights as well. So I'm probably going to use those Chaos Knights, and I'll need to get the Ogres and the Chaos Hounds if I add them. So
I remember you saying, I know that you had trouble ranking up those plastic ones. Do you remember the plastic ones before that were kind of the more like hunched, like
where their head was coming out of their chest, basically?
Yeah, and the shield would those guys were incredibly tough to rank up. I remember as well.
When I first built a Chaos army, it was for the store, and they wanted to do like a tournament. So I tried to build an army that had the fewest amount of models, and I managed to do, like, I think it was a 2,000 point army that had 23 models in it. Everything had the mark of Tzeentch, you know, so the Lord alone was like 300 points, you know, and just all sorts of stupid shit like that. And I had that squad of warriors, and yeah, they never fit on anything. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with those. But we're talking Storm of Chaos era Chaos Warriors. They're all kind of monopost. They're all standing like this, but we'll go there. I've got my Be'lakor t-shirt on to celebrate Chaos because he's a badass. Unfortunately, he won't be in the army. So, we got 3 minutes here. Yeah, and as far as color scheme, I'm probably gonna go with a dark black armor. I didn't take any pictures, but I'll share them with you guys. Some of the color schemes I've been working on. I've settled on something I think is gonna be like a dark black armor with kind of like burgundy cloaks. And then I want to do cool snow bases. I've been watching a lot of tutorials doing snow and ice and like cracked ice and things like that. So it'll be very dark models with very bright contrasted bases, which I think will make for a cool thing. They're marching down from the north. And yeah, I'm hoping it'll be something cool. So we'll see. I'm hoping to have the Warriors done next month and then just do one unit at a time. Again, probably buy something, build it, paint it, and then go on from there. So I've already got the Lord and the Knights, so probably be one of those next, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, very excited. Can't wait to see. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody puts together here. So that's pretty much going to be it for today, listeners. Thank you for joining us for starters. Be sure to join us next month as we'll have some progress to show off. And yeah, we'll see how far everybody can get with our delve into chaos. And if you want to join alongside us, leave a comment down below, share your pictures, email them to me at dragonsgreedgaming.com. I'd love to throw them on the channel here to show everybody as we're doing this. And if this inspires you to get into Warhammer or any painting whatsoever, let us know. I'd love to share it with everybody and enjoy a cool journey. So here's to the summer having fully painted armies. So thanks, guys. Great to see you all, and we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Peace. Hello, listeners. Great Unclean One here. I just wanted to thank you for taking your time to watch this video. For more content like this, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons? And if you're a fan of role-playing games, then be sure to check out one of our actual play series. We've got campaigns of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Alien the role-playing game, and Warhammer 40,000 Wrath and Glory, with plenty more to come. Finally, a huge thank you to all of our Patreon members. Your support means the world to us, and you help push the channel to even greater heights. We simply could not do this without all of you. And if you'd like to help support the channel yourself, even more than a like or subscribe, consider joining our Patreon and get yourself some cool rewards. Link in the description below. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next one. Same time, same place. Nighty night.